Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. I'm John and this is Hannah.
Hi.
And all this month we're going to be looking at the various prompts for RPGaDay 2025. So let's get into it. Okay, so it's day 20 of RPGaDay 2025. And the prompt for today is enter. So love what you're thinking when I say enter.
Well, it's all about that moment when the parties go through a door.
Okay.
And first up, you got to think about the door itself.
Yeah.
Be it like the door to a tavern that's open all the time, or be it the mighty magical gate of Endor, whatever.
Yeah.
It's all about how you describe it to the players and what's between those two scenes, if you get what I'm saying.
I think I understand. Are you, and forgive me if I'm wrong, are you talking about sort of, like building up tension as you're going to like open that door, or are we talking more about, sort of telegraphing a bit what you'd expect to find on the other side? Obviously, use your example of a tavern. In a standard pseudo-medieval like fantasy tavern, what you expect to see when you open that door, don't you? There's going to be some minstrel playing over in the corner. There's going to be people swigging back booze and whatever. There's probably going to be a no doubt portly barman like spitting into a mug and polishing it behind the bar. Whereas other times, if you're going into like the ancient gate of Endor or whatever we've decided to call it for this example, you might not really have much of an idea what's behind that.
Well, yeah, and partly it's about sort of player expectations and how hard have they had to work to get to that door to be able to go through it.
Yeah, okay.
What's on the other side of that door in your story is always going to be important, but getting the players to the door and how they go about getting there is also important.
Yeah, so it puts me in a mind of the quote from Tolkien in Lord of the Rings. I believe it's Gandalf talking to Frodo, or is it Bilbo? I forget.
It's a dangerous business, Frodo.
Yeah, and to quote it, he says, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to."
And yet, even there, that's Frodo going through a door, entering into the adventure, entering into the wider world.
Yeah.
In many ways, like, going through Farm Maggot's crops is more of that sort of journey, because that's like the first moment where they see the ring wraiths, isn't it? And
yeah, be careful when you're raiding Farmer Maggot's crop, man. Don't mess around with that.
And the party all gets together, and then they run off together, and we catch up to them later on the road to Bree.
Yeah.
But that whole is like entering into the adventure. There's so many different ways you can interpret the word again. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose for me, the thing it puts me in mind of is that sort of initial scene, or like the opening scene when you first start any session. Because, I mean, certainly the way I tend to run it is if I'm doing like a long running campaign, I'll have a quick recap of like, here's what happened last session, because it might have been like a week, 2 weeks before you actually played. Everyone's got stuff going on, easy to forget stuff. So quick little recap, just so that everyone remembers what point they were at the start of this session. Mm-hmm. And then there's normally like an initial scene which sort of kicks off the rest of the session, and it sort of really sets the tone for the rest of the session. Because let's say you start a game and you're like, oh, okay, you're travelling down the road to a small village where you've got some business, and you have like a little travel montage. It's very different to you starting literally like in the middle of a combat with like bandits' arrows like flying around you, and it sets the pace and the tone for the rest of that. Because obviously, if you start off and you're straight into a combat, it's like, oh fuck, we've got to dodge these arrows, right, we've got to deal with these bandits, we've got to do whatever. Whereas if you're in a nice sort of bucolic sort of rural surroundings, there's you're wandering past local farmers who are sort of like waving at you and whatever, there's a very different sort of pace and a flow to that session. And I think you can, as a GM, you can really sort of, again, almost telegraph to the players like, this is the sort of thing you're going to be getting later on in the session.
Yeah. It's also about those sort of bottle points on your flow chart of what's going to happen in your adventure. And obviously different people handle this in many different ways.
Yeah, of course.
But if you are someone that does the flowchart thing where here's the inciting event, they enter through that event, There's then a few different ways they can drag off.
Obviously, you guys can't see this, but Hannah's miming with her hands the way a flowchart would go.
All right. Making fun of me. I'll fold my arms like this instead.
No, that's
Right.
fine, look. But no, you make a very good point.
You can go off in many different paths, but then you have to get your player group back together,
Yeah.
and they have to enter through another doorway, effectively.
Yeah.
Whether it's a literal doorway or just a moment where the player group gets back together and moves on to the next scene.
Yeah, and I mean, we spoke in a previous episode about how the dungeon layout is almost like a flowchart for itself, and it's sort of like a microcosm of like choices within an RPG, because it renders them down to like a very simple fashion. You know, do you go through this door? Oh, you can see 2 corridors. Do you pick the left one? Do you pick the right one? Do you go into this room? Do you go into that room? And it's really like the simplest form of those RPG choices, which can be very much more complicated depending on what game you're playing. But you are right. At some point, if you want to get involved in the adventure, you've got to make that initial choice to enter the door, enter the dungeon, do whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's it from me and Hannah for this RPGaDay 2025 episode.
Bye!
Hopefully you'll join us in the next one. And until we see you again, take care, stay safe, and whenever you're playing, have fun.